got to keep a watchful eye.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and it's us on you.
It's live now.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Gerald Jackson. I'm leader of the City Council and I chair the Cabinet, which is meeting today virtually. My apologies that it's a Friday afternoon, but PERDA starts on Monday and there are things we need to clear down before then if possible. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting and there's been the opportunity for written representations to be submitted. Anna, have we had any written representations from either members of the public or councillors?
No.
Okay, thank you. We're meeting virtually in response to limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the purposes of this meeting, the City Solicitor has advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings Regulations 2020 number 392. Members, please keep your cameras on throughout the meeting and only turn your microphones on when you wish to speak. Let's move down the page. Officers, it says can you keep cameras off? I'm not sure we really need to do that, but anyway. I'll now ask Cabinet members to introduce themselves as they appear on my screen, and then we'll go forward from there. So, Councillor Hugh Mason.
Councillor Hugh Mason, the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy.
Councillor Lynn Stagg.
Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Councillor Steve Pitt.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development and Vice Chair of this committee.
And how are you feeling, Steve?
Reasonable at best.
Excellent, so fair to middling. All right. Councillor Susie Horton.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
Okay, Councillor David Ashmore.
Dave Ashmore for Environment and Climate Change.
Councillor Matthew Willington.
Matthew Willington, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Councillor Chris Atwell.
Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Communities and Central Services.
Councillor Darren Sanders.
Thank you. I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness.
Now, let's have a look. I can't see Councillor Lee Hunt here yet. Lee, are you here? No? Okay. So I don't have apologies from Lee, but we'll see. But we do have apologies from Andy Biddle, who's been represented by Rachel Roberts. And I can see Rachel, you loitering there. So we've got no deputations to date. Let's go through and identify council officers who are here and what your roles are. So let's go. Rachel Cutler. Hello, Rachel. Do you want to say who you are and what you do and why you're here?
Afternoon. Yes, Rachel Cutler, Head of Planning Policy, and we're here about the Seafront Master Plan.
Excellent. I've got Helen Dickerson next.
Hello, Helen Dickerson, Head of Litigation in Legal Services, providing legal support to Cabinet today.
That's good. Helen, I was just worried when you said you were here at litigation, whether we'd done something wrong.
Not so far, Gerald.
Well, not that you know of. Dave Emmett.
Hi, Dave Emmett, Head of Waste Services, presenting the new Food Waste Round Design Report.
Great. Matt Gunnison.
Thank you, Matt Gunnison, Lead for Public Health Intelligence, here to present the paper on modelling potential future COVID-19 cases.
Okay. Colette Hill.
Hi, I'm Colette Hill, Assistant Director for Neighbourhoods. I'm here to support Dave with his redesign paper.
Lovely. Stephen Ho.
Hi, Stephen Ho, Principal Planning Officer, presenting the item for Seafront Master Plan.
Thank you very much. Anna Martin, keeping us in order. Anna, are you still with us?
I am, yes, I was just unmuting myself. Anna Martin, Democratic Services, thank you.
Okay, now it's shifted around. I think I've got Rachel Roberts next.
Hi, yeah, my name's Rachel Roberts and I'm Head of Safeguarding Mental Health and Learning Disability Services for Adult Social Care, and I'm here to support Richard Webb around the Adult Social Care Strategy and Finance Planning.
Great. Tristan?
Afternoon, members. Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
Great. Richard Webb?
Good afternoon, members. Richard Webb, Finance Manager for Adult Social Care and Public Health, for item 6 on the agenda in relation to adult social care funding.
Okay, Chris Ward.
Afternoon all, Chris Ward, Director of Finance, supporting the Cabinet in all matters finance, but also presenting item 5, Revenue Budget Monitoring 2020-2021. Thank you.
And last, but by definitely no means least, David Williams.
David Williams, Chief Executive, supporting all of you.
Great. Thank you very much, colleagues. Okay, so we've done apologies, we've done declarations. Oh, we haven't done declarations of interest. Colleagues, any declarations anybody needs to make of any interests? No? Okay, thanks very much indeed. A Seafront Master Plan. Stephen, is this yourself or is it Rachel?
I'll be myself, leader.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leap in, Stephen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. I'm presenting this report also on behalf of Ian Maguire, the Assistant Director of Planning and Economic Growth, and this has been brought under the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and City Development concerning the Seafront Master Plan. So the covering report has 2 recommendations. Firstly, to recommend that members note the results of the public consultation that was held in September and October 2020, and as further detailed in the report contained in Appendix 1. And secondly, to recommend that members revoke the 2013 Seafront Master Plan and adopt the final 2021 version of the Seafront Master Plan included in Appendix 2. So moving on in the covering report, Section 3 of the report provides a brief background on the preparation and development of the new Seafront Master Plan. This is an update of the currently adopted 2013 version of the Supplementary Planning Document, or SPD for short. And as an SPD, this provides strategic and detailed planning guidance, and adopting it will have the statutory effect that it will be a material planning consideration for the purposes of decision making for the seafront area from Old Portsmouth to Eastney Point. And this area is defined within the SPD itself. This new version of the Seafront Master Plan has been in development for a couple of years, starting off with a period of public consultation and engagement that was carried out in summer of 2018, and again another round of consultation in the Q1 of 2019. And so both of these initial rounds were for seeking views on issues and options. Then in September 2020, Cabinet approval was given to go out to public consultation on a draft version of the master plan, and this consultation occurred over September and October for 6 weeks. So in terms of the outcomes of this most recent round of public consultation, again, a full report of this is included in Appendix 1. I'll just cover the main headlines, these being that 1,268 responses were received to the online survey. And so given this number in proportion to the number of Portsmouth residents who are over 16 years old, this ensures a 95% confidence level, which, according to best practice, is well within acceptable parameters. So overall, the public response was very positive towards the master plan, and we're pleased to acknowledge this, and this has given us a strong general sense of consensus and support on the contents of the master plan in terms of the vision and objectives, the thematic guidance, and the area-based guidance contained within. In conjunction, responses were also received from members of the public via email and from various landowners and organisations and from our statutory consultees. Of course, members, you can defer to the full report for a further breakdown of the figures and some of the responses. But I would just like to take the opportunity now to thank all those who have participated and engaged in all rounds of public consultations that were conducted as part of this whole process. So in terms of finalising the Seafront Master Plan for adoption, full consideration has been given towards the outcome of the consultation, along with further follow-up discussion meetings held with internal colleagues within the council and various other external stakeholders. And so this has led to some changes and modifications, of which, broadly speaking, fall under the category of making editorial changes or correctional updating of facts, and changes that provide further clarification on the various content and guidance contained within the master plan itself. A full schedule of changes is included in Appendix 3 of this report. But ultimately, in our view as officers of the local planning authority, this final version represents the version which strikes the best balance in mediating the various interests and objectives of the council as a whole and of the public and stakeholders. So furthermore, the master plan is supported and informed by various technical reports, and these are included in the rest of the appendices. So in conclusion, the recommendation of officers for members to adopt this final version of the Seafront Master Plan is based on the view that this master plan represents one of the key strategies towards realising a seafront which all residents of Portsmouth and beyond can continue to be proud of and enjoy as an important area and key asset of the city. And this is perhaps best encapsulated by the Seafront Master Plan's vision, and that is that the seafront's natural and historic assets will be protected, conserved and enhanced, that the seafront will be a beautifully functional, sustainable and resilient place that is healthy, safe, enjoyable and accessible to all. So of course, adopting this master plan is only the first step towards achieving this vision, and there will be further work and processes beyond this point, including further public consultations as necessary that may relate to specific projects or opportunities referred to in the master plan itself, for example, relating to Avenue de Caen or St. Helens Parade, or the opportunities relating to specific sites within the seafront area. And indeed, there will be need for further collaboration and engagement in considering the potential opportunities that are presented as part of the Sea Defences project of the South Sea Coastal Scheme. And so with that, officers respectfully request that members endorse and improve the recommendations per the report and move to adopt the 2021 Seafront Master Plan SPD. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen, and thank you for your team for all the work on this. Colleagues, you heard the presentation. Anybody like to come in to comment at this point, or are we happy to accept this? Matthew? And then Councillor Hugh Mason.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for the presentation, and thanks, Leader, for handing over to me as one of the councillors for the best part of the seafront, the wonderful 3 miles that we have right along from South Parade Pier all the way along to Eastleigh Point. It's a real pleasure to see this document come to us today on the back of the consultation that's been going on over the last period of time that we've had. This is actually the second Seafront Master Plan that's come in during my 9 years on the council, and I think this is an improvement on what was already a very good Seafront Master Plan that we had last time as well. I think there are, as Stephen has mentioned, this will go out to further consultation for people to consider and have a look at in terms of some of the specific projects we want to put along there, which is to really make sure that the seafront is opened up and available for all the people in the city and indeed visitors to the city, and make it as pleasant a seafront and as good a visitor experience for everyone, no matter whether they live literally across the road from the seafront or if they are coming from abroad or the north of Scotland, or indeed even Paulsgrove. It's a real opportunity to really do our seafront justice, which is one of the great assets that this city has. So I'm really pleased to see the things that are opening up in that, but also to make sure it's a pleasant environment, especially for people cycling and walking there, because actually having low congestion, low pollution on our seafront is really key to people being able to enjoy it at the most, but making sure that people, especially those with disabilities, are able to access all of the seafront at all the time as well, because that is really important for their health and well-being and for everyone else's. So thank you so much for the plan. really thank everyone who's got involved in the consultation so far, and I really look forward to this being a real mark of the way we want to have our seafront going well into the future.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hugh Mason. And I see Councillor Lee Hunt has joined us. Welcome, Lee. You've fought through the technology, have you?
Indeed, Leader. Nothing stops me.
Excellent. Any interest to declare, Councillor Lee Hunt?
No, thank you, Leader.
Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Hugh Mason, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I want to make 3 points. The first one is that this Seafront Master Plan was necessary. The previous Seafront Master Plan was good and it was well thought out, but the world has changed. We're now working on sea defences and doing major changes to the physical structure of our seafront, but also the world has changed, the economy has changed, and the way in which people are likely to come to the seaside has changed. Therefore, we needed, and it is important that we have, an up-to-date Seafront Master Plan. So that's the first point. The second point is that this Seafront Master Plan has been consulted on. It has been modified on the basis of the consultation. It has in no way been watered down. It remains an ambitious Seafront Master Plan, but it is important to note the way in which the public views have been taken into consideration in the last year, bringing this forward to ask for our adoption. The third point I think is important is that although we have here a very detailed master plan, not every section is a fait accompli. The main outlines are very clear, but there's a lot of detail in here, which is possibilities, intentions, hopes, which will be the subject of further consultation with the public and further consideration by this Cabinet and by the Planning Committee before it goes ahead. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I mean, obviously I was in the chair when and now it's Councillor Pitt this time. I'm glad to hear Councillor Winnington approve of the last Seafront Master Plan, and we worked very hard on it. We involved the university and students in helping us bring in ideas from the public. And for me, what's really important, it is 3.7 miles long. It's a great opportunity. They say that it is the jewel in the crown of the city, and we must agree with that, of course. It is a beautiful seafront, particularly today, in the lovely sunshine. And you see how, even in a short space of time, it has evolved. And whilst there is a place for fish and chips and burgers and so on, we brought in fantastic eating venues, wonderful eateries as a result of the previous master plan. South Sea Beach Cafe, Eastney Coffee Cup, and a whole range of new eateries along the seafront. And nobody can help but miss what we did with the hot walls, the remarkable change there that is going to help us preserve all the buildings, the historic buildings along the seafront, and then to see the fantastic work that's been done with the landing craft and the reconfiguration of D-Day Museum, and for visitors and residents alike, the beach volleyball that's gone in that we look after, and the splash balls for the children, and while still retaining the ice creams and so on. So you have to plan for all of this. They don't happen by chance. People like Stephen and his team have got to put in hours of work, and Steve Pitt to ensure that our seafront always is evolving. And now we've got the challenge of rising seas, a huge challenge to our city, and it's good for people to see that we're planning for it, and to make opportunities out of adversity sometimes, and occasionally, of course, out of doing this, we discover things like the old architectural significance down at the moat at the moment, which Chris Atwells knows much more about at the moment. So it's just fantastic. We have a fantastic seafront, fantastic people looking after it, a fantastic city, and a fantastic future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Councillor Steve Peck.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to echo some of the comments made by Matt and Hugh and Lee, but also to point out to people that, and I obviously in my portfolio, I do see some moans occasionally from people who think that we've neglected the seafront, but I think the bit they miss is the fact that the reason we haven't poured a lot of money into the public realm along large stretches of it over the last decade is because everybody knew that this project was coming and that this would ultimately be the major change, in which was to carry out the largest local council run sea defences project in the country, £120 million worth of investment, and therefore the reviewing the Seafront Master Plan to align with that. I'd encourage people to have a look at the Collaborative Enhancements Plan as well, which is one of the appendices attached to the plan, to show the opportunities that do exist. And this administration's found money for the last 2 years in a capital budget to allocate 200,000 each of those years to go with over 200,000 that already existed. So it's over £500,000 put by, but that's not enough. We need to keep adding to this over the next few years and then seeking outside funding and investment in order to make sure that we really can deliver a world-class seafront. And that's the aspiration that we all want to achieve. So thank you to Stephen and the team for the work they've done on this. There's some interesting opportunities available in here. And to those members of the public who think that this is all about selling out the seafront to developers, it absolutely is not about that. What it is about is creating a world-class seafront that you can all be proud of. And that's our responsibility, and that's the commitment that we've made.
Okay, colleagues, I don't have anybody else indicating to speak. So, colleagues, are you happy to accept this report and the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Stephen, Rachel and the team for all the work. Okay, let's move on to the extension, raising the extension of the food waste recycling collection, which Dave Emmett is here for. Dave, hello. Welcome. Do you want to walk us through this?
I will do. Hello, members. The for information paper I'm presenting today has been requested by the leader and is to update the Cabinet on the round design work for the new food waste collection rounds. It follows on from the decision by Cabinet on the 2nd of February to continue with the current food waste rounds, Food Waste 1 and Food Waste 2, and approve the funding for the further 2 rounds, Food Waste 3 and Food Waste 4, for a 12-month period from September 2021. In order to design the 2 new food waste rounds, Food Waste 3 and Food Waste 4, it has now been necessary to design all the rounds, including Food Waste 5 and Food Waste 6, for a citywide food waste collection service. This includes how food waste collections will be delivered to the city's flats, the communal collections. However, just to note, although the report talks about rounds Food Waste 5 and Food Waste 6, the funding for these has not yet been identified. The report firstly details the curbside extensions that have been identified and can be added to Food Waste 1 and Food Waste 2. This will add at least a further 2,683 properties onto the rounds, taking the number of properties covered by these rounds up to approximately 26,500. These extensions will be rolled out after Easter, and the roads are listed in Appendix C of the report. The report secondly details the roads that will be included in the 2 new food waste rounds, Food Waste 3 and Food Waste 4, and the roads for these are listed in Appendix D of the report. The new rounds will come online during September and October this year, with the extensions to follow when the rounds are fully embedded. These rounds will cover approximately 28,000 properties, including the extensions. This approach will then leave a proportion of curbside properties which will make up a 5th food waste round, and these roads are also shown in Appendix D. The report thirdly details how the collections to the city's flats will be made, some 23,000 properties called communal collections. A proportion of communal blocks, some 3,000 properties, will be included on the curbside food waste rounds and are listed in Appendix D. These properties included onto food waste rounds 1 to 4 will be rolled out after the curbside property extensions. The remaining 1,049 blocks, some nearly 20,000 properties, will make up a dedicated communal round Food Waste 6, and we are currently in the process of designing this collection schedule. Just to hand back to the leader now.
Brilliant. Well, my thanks, I'm really grateful for this work, Dave, Colette and all the team. I think this is one of the very best things that we've been doing at the City Council. I'm struck that there are only 2 councils in Hampshire that bother to do food waste recycling, ourselves and Eastleigh. I think it's really important, and if we're going to take seriously looking after the environment, then this is about collecting 5,000 tonnes of rubbish a year and diverting it out of the waste stream, away from the incinerator and into recycling, so it can be composted. And when we got the anaerobic digester built, we can collect the methane off that and put that back into the gas main. So I think it's really important. When I talk to people around about the city, they really like this service. They really like being able to make a difference from home. So I'm really pleased. I'm pleased. Thanks, Dave, for all the work on this. The bit I have a real question about, though, is we mainstreamed the funding for this for the first third of this in the budget that went forward in February to the council, and I am surprised and disappointed that both our Labour and our Conservative colleagues voted against that, which would have meant that the extension would have been impossible. I'm very pleased we're going down this road. I'm pleased that we're looking after the environment seriously, and that with this administration that will happen. I've now got Councillor Lee Hunt, Councillor Dave Ashmore, Councillor Darren Sanders and Councillor Matthew Willington. Dave, can I come to Lee, would you mind if I come to Dave Ashmore first, as he's the portfolio holder?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Mr. Ashmore.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just to reiterate all the things you've said there, Leader, and just a big thank you on the officers there with Dave, Colette and everyone. Everyone's really done this really well, going forward. Since we came in, we said, how can we improve the recycling rates here in Portsmouth, because we're not we're not in the top around the country, but this is one of the ways that it's going to be most effective. We've introduced things like carton banks, for example. You can now recycle the cartons. We've got an extra couple of glass banks in as well recently, but this one is a real big one that will make a difference, because the food waste in the black bags or your black bins, that would have gone straight, as you say, to the rest of the waste stream, whereas now it's actually being put to use. It's actually laying things out to how it can be in the future. People are really happy about this, really want to participate in that, and I'm really glad that we've started to mention stuff about the communal rounds there, because it can include everyone. People in flats have said, what do we do? Well, we're addressing that here. So yeah, this is a really positive scheme that we've introduced. I'm really happy to see how it's all going ahead and how hard officers have worked on this. Really pleased. You're a credit to the council, and the residents have been really happy with this. Recycling's a big thing. We've seen in the Portsmouth News they're doing a 7-day coverage of things like what the Climate Action Board are doing and how we can be greener in all areas. Yesterday they did a piece on recycling. It was really good to see the repair cafe in Fratton, that was mentioned in there, and Package Free Larder was mentioned in there from Elm Grove. Things like this, they've got real big opportunities now, because people are wanting to know how to either recycle or to reduce what they use and what they consume in the first place. And I think it's a real good balance. I think this is a real good policy that we've put in place, and it's a real positive for the city. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you, Dave, for all your work. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, I have to commend Councillor Dave Ashmore and his officers for the work that they've been doing on this, and bringing the speed at which this has all been rolled out is quite remarkable. It's one of the things that this Liberal Democrat administration has prioritised. And the leader touched on it just now. One of only 2 councils in Hampshire that do this work, and both Liberal Democrat. Rather than not condemn our Labour and Conservative colleagues who haven't got a clue, quite frankly, sometimes when it comes to doing this kind of thing. They don't really care about it. If they did, they'd have voted for it, wouldn't they? But I want to praise the councillors that did support our budget to make sure this goes through. Councillor Judy and Smith and and the independent councillors, the People's Party for Portsmouth, Progressive Party for Portsmouth. So thank them for helping to get this through. I also wanted to follow on from what Councillor Ashmore said, because the good news for Portsmouth just keeps on coming, doesn't it? It is quite remarkable in the face of this pandemic, and with so many officers having to be diverted to the coronavirus issue, that we continue to do this amazingly good work with trees, thousands of trees going in across the city, and Portsmouth being the forefront council in the United Kingdom, or certainly England and Wales, at installing green energy, solar panels, and looking to roll out electrical vehicle charging points. And the great thing about the food waste trial is it is a very important part of that, is Councillor Ashmore touched on it, is you're removing 40%, I think. We are removing 40%, good, I'm getting the nod there, thank you, Darren. 40% of what is essentially wet waste out of the bin, food waste, which would otherwise go to the incinerator, and it makes the incinerator work harder to incinerate it. So we're saving on energy and carbon all of the time. And that's seen, I think, a massive reduction by about a third over the last few years of carbon reduction around Portsmouth, up in the environment, up in the air pollution. So a remarkable amount of work by lots of very dedicated councillors and officers working to make Portsmouth an even better place to be than it already is. You know, from the seafront, which we just talked upon, right up to the hill. It's an amazing city and a lot of very good, amazing people working hard to make it even better. So I love what we're doing. I think what we're doing is amazing, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee Hunt. And Councillor Darren Saunders.
Thank you, Gerald, and also thank you very much for requesting this paper. It's always interesting. You know, something's popular when people are complaining they don't have it. And I regularly get complaints about people in the food who are not at roads who are not in the food waste recycling trial, who are desperate to know when they're going to get it. And I'm delighted that you've asked officers to do that, because pretty much every single road in the area I represent is on that list. So we know that they're going to get it sooner or later, and I think that's a very, very good thing. I think Lee has actually undersold what we've done as an administration over the last 3 years. Portsmouth is now a plastic-free community. If you'd have said that 3 years ago, you'd have been laughed at. Council tenants, the area I oversee, are now getting renewable electricity. Again, 3 years ago, you'd have been laughed at. The chance for 24,000 homes to get solar panels. Again, 3 years ago, you wouldn't have said that was possible. Planting and hundreds of trees being planted in my own ward on the Eastern Road and at Baffin's Pond, led by Councillor Lynn Stagg, who's done some planting of her own. This is all incredibly good news. And is part of a desire to tackle the climate emergency. And as Lee has said, this is crucial to that. We went down the route of food waste recycling because, frankly, it would increase recycling faster and by more than anything else. And that's absolutely crucial if we have to tackle a climate emergency. And on a point in my own portfolio, I'm delighted to see that we've got flats in there, because that's actually very crucial, both council and privately run. So it's not a bad thing that we've done over the last 3 years, and I hope we're able to do some more. I'm disappointed some colleagues have voted against this at the budget meeting. I hope they reconsider, and I think voters are still desperate to make sure it can happen. So thank you, Gerald, for bringing this paper, and thank you to Dave and the team for delivering what is an amazing achievement.
Thank you. Matthew, finally.
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank colleagues who've talked on this one, and indeed the officers who have worked so incredibly hard to make this work. This has been a priority of us for some years now. So since we took over administration, this was what we wanted to do. We wanted to make a real difference to what we do in the city in terms of waste, and this was the solution that was not just viable, but actually really, really good to do. Really, really sensible thing to do. Food waste is not great. Throwing away food you don't need to do. You don't need isn't great. However, even if you're preparing vegetables or anything like that, you often have offcuts and all that kind of thing. So you do always have food waste. So what's the best thing to do with that? Throw it in a black bag and it just sits on a rubbish dump or gets incinerated and you don't get any benefit from it. Or you get it recycled, you send it to an anaerobic digester and it creates renewable energy and it does things in a sustainable way. That's the best way to do this. So this fits in not just with something that is good for its own sake, but it actually creates things that can be used as green energy as well on a far greater basis. And this, of course, fits in with our ambition, which we are pursuing, to actually have an anaerobic digester as well that the City Council is going to build. So instead of it having to go elsewhere, it will actually go to a council-run site. And then we can also encourage neighbouring authorities to actually go down this road as well, because on their doorstep they will have an anaerobic digester. As Councillor Sanders has said, people are chomping at the bit to be involved in this trial. So in the next phase, some of the roads in my wards, just south of Albert Road, are going to be involved, are going to have it rolled out to them. I was just after we could start speaking to people again, I was down there and people were chomping at the bit to get involved. It doesn't happen very often. For everyone watching, it doesn't happen very often. You have schemes that people are so desperate to be involved with that the City Council is running, but this is one of them. That is a real message to you. You're getting things right. And I really, really ask, as Councillor Sanders and Councillor Hunter said, it is a real shame that Labour and Conservative councillors to
Matthew, you're breaking up on me.
So it's very much something we should be proud of, and I'm very proud that we're doing this and taking this forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't have anybody else indicating. Colleagues, are you happy with this report? I've got two questions to ask. A, Fiona from the news, are you going to publish the names of the roads in the news that are getting this and when they're getting it? And B, our colleagues in the comms team, I'm not sure who is here from the comms team, probably Chris Ward, about putting these roads up onto the council's website so people can see when they're going to be done. Chris, can we get that organised?
Of course.
Excellent. Okay, now moving on to Chris's second job in terms of money, not just websites.
Leader, if I may interject, Portsmouth News has put, have put the roads in the news.
Excellent. Good. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Ward, money.
Thank you, Leader. So item 5 on the agenda. This is your Q3 budget monitoring report. So this is the forecast of the outturn position for the current financial year as at the end of December this year. It's quite a complicated report because it's complicated by COVID. So let me see if I can take this in its component parts. If we set aside COVID for a second and look at what the rest of the council's overall financial position looks like, we are forecasting overall underspend for the council for the year of 3 million. I stress it's a forecast at this year. It's a forecast at this point, but that really is driven by, well, I'll pick a couple of highlights. One of the highlights in terms of the reason for that forecast underspend is a £1.2 million underspend in children and families, which, as you know, has been a quite challenging portfolio for a number of years, and £0.8 million in your portfolio, Leader. So they're two of the larger ones, which I could expand on if necessary, but they are driving the overall forecast non-COVID related underspend of 3 million. If I now talk to the COVID impact on the council, you'll recall that when you approved the budget in February, or the revised budget in February, you set aside a fund for COVID of 12.4 million. So what that means is that any financial impact of COVID in the current year would be set against that 12.4 million, and therefore it will be neutral on the council's overall budget, because that fund is intended to deal with any of the consequences of COVID. So the expectation this year is that the council's overall position will be an underspend of 3 million. Now, if we look at the COVID position, it's an uncertain position for us, clearly, and we've put a range of forecasts within the budget report that suggest that the COVID position for this year, which takes account of all of the spend that the council has made on COVID-related matters, and deducts from that all of the government's financial support that has been provided. Our expectations are that the position could either be in a central base case scenario for this year only, a surplus of 0.8 million, but in a pessimistic scenario, it could be a deficit of 5.2 million. Whatever that position turns out to be, will be set against the 12.4 million that you have set aside. And then the residual amount of that 12.4 million is there to protect the council against the legacy impacts of COVID over the medium term, so over the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think I'll say anything more than that at this stage, but obviously if there's any questions, then I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we need to record our thanks to everybody who's worked within the City Council, not just in the finance team, but across the City Council, to make sure that services continue for people across the city. But also we've done it in a financially responsible way. I know some councils are under really extreme financial pressure because of COVID. And what this says is that the City Council has acted in a financially responsible way. We've spent £3 million less than we were expected to spend, and that £3 million can go effectively into our savings account for the future. And that basic financial responsibility and running the council's finances in a sensible and common sense way is the underpinning of everything we do. If we get the finances wrong, then it's very difficult to make anything else go right. Getting the finances right means that you've got the chance to do everything else right. So my thanks to everybody for working so hard on this. Councillor Hugh Mason, you've indicated, Hugh.
A question for clarification, please, Chris. Sorry, Mr. Ward. In your second recommendation, you're excluding funding losses relating to the current year, but occurring in later years. Is this the legacy effect of COVID? Or are there additional things there in addition to the legacy effect?
This, unfortunately, is a peculiarity associated with funding and financing in local government. We fully expect that there'll be business rate losses and council tax losses in the current year. But the financial effects of those on the council, on the budget, will not hit the council until next financial year. So that's really what that relates to. It relates to the fact that impact in this year, or the reality of what will happen will happen in this year, but the financial impact will not be until future years. And that's one of the reasons where we do have a deficit position, if you like, because the funding, the government support for losses on council tax and business rates is not 100%. It's roughly 75%.
Okay. Hugh, does that satisfy you?
Yes, I just needed clarity on that. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Okay, colleagues, I haven't got anybody else indicating. Are we happy to accept the report? Thank you very much indeed. We move on to item 6, which is the utilisation of the additional funding for adult social care. And I think we have Richard Webb and Rachel Roberts here to talk this through. So the City Council in the budget has identified an additional £2.8 million for adult social care. It seems to me in the aftermath of the pandemic, we could do nothing else than that. But it's important that people know what that additional money is going on so that people are able to see the value of it. So, Rachel, are you leading or is Richard leading?
Leader, sorry, go on, Rachel.
Go on, Richard.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be leading on this, but Rachel's here if you've got any questions around sort of the practice side of social care, but I'll take you through the finances. So the purpose of this report is that it's an information report, is to provide further details on the cost pressures being experienced by adult social care and how the additional funding you referred to will provided in next year's budget will be utilised. I do not intend to go through the report in detail, but I would like to just highlight some of the following points. So the overall funding for social care, for adult social care, has increased by 3.4 million when compared to 2021, reflecting both an increase in the funding to meet the inflationary cost pressures on existing services, but also the increasing client demand pressures. There's an analysis at paragraph 3.2 showing how the additional funding of 2.8 million that you referred to from the adult social care precept and the social care grant approved by full council in February will be utilised. You can see that 91% of this additional funding has been allocated to fund the increased provision of care and support for Portsmouth citizens. Prior to the impact of COVID-19, client demand within adult social care was fairly stable. However, during the period from April to October 2020, client numbers had increased by around 3.8%. One of adult social care's long-term strategic aims has been to support as many people as possible to live independently in their own homes for as long as possible. But the COVID pandemic and the response to it has accelerated growth in the number of people in their own homes requiring domiciliary care support, whilst there has been a reduction in the demand for residential care placements, leading to a further increase in spare capacity in the local, within the local care market. Our forecast anticipates that there will be approximately 127 additional domiciliary care placement clients in 21-22, combined with an increase in the cost of care due to increasing complexity of need. Additionally, although the council has seen a reduction in the number of clients placed in residential care, the average cost of placements has increased. The forecast for next year is an increase of approximately 24% in the average cost of placements. It is not possible to definitively explain the reason for this increase, but it's possibly due to the combination of increasing complexity of need, COVID-related costs, and the lower occupancy levels that the providers are seeing. As highlighted within the report, I say one of the adult social care long-term strategic aims has been to support as many people as possible to live independently in their own homes. Whilst the long-term strategic objectives of the service remain intact, COVID-19 has significantly changed the current operational landscape of the service, both in terms of the level of client demand and the type of support required. In response to this rapid change in the market, adult social care are now seeking to work with the providers to develop a sustainable care strategy that will seek to provide clear longer-term commissioning intentions in respect of both client needs and the overall forecast capacity required across the city. Through working with providers to develop and implement a sustainable care strategy, it is also intended that the service will seek to ensure the cost of residential care placements are commissioned at a level that supports the financial stability of both the care providers and adult social care in the immediate to longer term. So thank you, and if you've got any questions, happy to take them now.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm Matthew Willington, as portfolio holder, I'm sure will want to come in a second, but my question really to you, Richard, is if you hadn't have had the money, the extra 2.8 million, what would have happened?
Well, as highlighted in the report, 91% of that additional funding that's been allocated is going directly to support the provision of care and support for Portsmouth residents. So those care needs will still have needed to be met.
So those 120 families, if there hadn't been the money to be able to finance this, what would have happened?
Well, the City Council's got a statutory responsibility to meet need where it's identified in accordance with the relevant legislation affecting the service. So the City Council would still have had to have identified and met that need.
Okay, thanks very much. Matthew.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Richard and Rachel, for presenting the report to us today. I said in the item a couple of items ago when we were talking about food waste recycling and the importance of that's something people want and unfortunately some councillors from Labour, all Labour councillors and some Conservative councillors voted against that at the budget last month. But what really astonished me was that they voted against £2.8 million extra for adult social care. Didn't not support it and just abstain, but they actively voted against it. And this isn't something that's nice to do. This was absolutely essential to the running of adult social care for our most vulnerable people. Let's be clear about this. Adult social care looks after our most vulnerable people, most vulnerable adults in this city. And if we didn't have this money coming in and supporting these most vulnerable adults in the city, as Richard has said, we have a statutory duty to support them, but it would have meant that we would have had to make cuts elsewhere. We wouldn't have been able to do things elsewhere. So that actually, and that 2.8 million isn't just now. This is into the future. This is baked into the base budget of adult social care now. And that means we have got that support, and those people have that support going forward into the future. The pandemic has changed so much. The pandemic has given us so many things that we haven't had to deal with before. Richard has given us an overview of the additional cost that's putting, additional burden that's putting on adult social care, but also it's shown the additional cost and burden that's going on care providers, both the city, where we run our own care homes and we do our own care, but also independent care providers. And some people have been talking about as if this is just private sector, this is for-profit organisations that are doing this. That simply isn't true. We're talking in Portsmouth in particular. We're not talking about big corporations by and large. We're talking about small local businesses, single or maybe one or two homes based in the city. That's what our providers are. And some of them are actually registered charities. We need this money to be able to support them, to be able to support our most vulnerable people. And the worst thing is, if we had not had this £2.8 million, if we weren't able to underpin the care and care providers in this city, some of those care providers would have gone under. And some still may go under. We don't know. But at least we've got that underpinning to be able to support people if that happens. And who would suffer if those care providers go under? It would be the most vulnerable adults in this city. So it really is so critical that we had that. And I really thank Richard and Rachel and Andy, who's can't be here today, for putting that in such stark terms about showing why we needed this money, what we can invest in, and indeed the work we're doing into the future to actually get a sustainable care system post-pandemic when everything has changed, the things have changed, so we can make sure that people are safeguarded. That is our most critical thing that we do for our most vulnerable people, safeguarding people, looking after people, not some kind of political ideology, vendetta or anything like that. This is simply about looking after people and putting people first. And so I'm really proud that we took that decision. I'm really proud of every councillor, Lib Dem, Progressive Portsmouth people, Councillor John Ferret as well, it must be mentioned, all voted for that. And those who didn't, and those who abstained, okay, you might have had your reasons, but those who voted against it, I do condemn you. I absolutely condemn you, because it was completely the wrong thing to do and utterly irresponsible. And you should have to answer to those who rely on the city council, the most vulnerable in the community, for why you opposed the spending of this money and the putting of this money to adult social care.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Richard. As you know, I'm very drawn to the remark from Richard just a little bit earlier, when he says that when he points out, and he was trying to be kind to everybody, I think, but he points out that the £2.8 million, if it was not allocated, would have to be spent. It would have to be found from somewhere, because this is a statutory obligation. I'm not sure people really always get it, because there are some things that the council do which are statutory, and we actually have to do it. We must spend this money on the people that need it for all sorts of good reasons. So that 2.8 million, if it wasn't raised this way, would have had to have been found another way. Now, there are lots of other statutory things that we do around education, for example. And there's a lot of things that this council do which are non-statutory, like the food waste trial that we talked about earlier on, like some of the things that we're doing around the seafront. But also in my own area, the community safety area, community wardens. They are not a statutory function. But by working with Councillor Sanders in housing and many others, we cobbled together an amount of money, and together with CCTV, safeguarding cameras, which, if you ask me, amount to around about £2.5 million every year. So in order to fund, if we had not done this money in this budget, the 2.8 million, which Labour and the Conservatives voted against doing, we would have had to have got it from somewhere else. And you can bet your bottom dollar, one of the first lot to have gone would have been the community warden service and the safeguarding teams. The last time around, the Tories identified all of youth services, and they deleted all of youth services. And now we see us trying to rebuild those services, giving young people more and better things to do, which is why we're looking at Brownsbury Park, after we consulted with people in Milton about what they wanted. And all around the city, people wanted more and better things to do. But all around the city, people want to feel safe because serious violent crime is rising. And our response is to do the community wardens, to do Brownsbury Park, to do more and better safeguarding cameras, buying in 7 more new mobile cameras to look after women and everybody as they walk around the streets, and to do better lighting. Now that's because of their short-term view is what Labour and the Conservatives jeopardised with their vote, that 2.8 million. It means so much. It isn't only about social services and looking after those very needy people, but it is also about the ripple effect into the other services and the things that we have had to have stopped doing. Had to have stopped doing the community wardens, probably not rolled out the food waste trial. A whole host of things would not have been able to do. We would not have been able to do unless we had got that 2.8 million embedded. And just think, over the next 10 years, that equates to £28 million into social services to look after people. And if we didn't do it, £28 million of non-statutory services that would have to be deleted year in and year out, slowly eroding the sorts of things that make this council, this Lib Dem administration, so different to an awful lot of councils around us. So it's a good thing that we did, and I'm very grateful to Richard and to Rachel and all the others helping us make these decisions for good reasons.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. You're the last person to indicate. So, colleagues, are you happy to accept the report and our thanks to people? And I think it has been very clear that there are a lot of families in the city who will be looked after because of this, who would not have been supported if we hadn't made the decision to put this money into adult social care. Okay, thank you very much. Finally, coming on to the final report is about where we are in terms of COVID and where we might be going. And Matt normally has nice slides to show us with nice graphs. And I'm sure you're going to be doing that, aren't you, Matt?
I can certainly show you some slides on where we are at the moment, if that would be helpful.
And where we might go, because I think it's my feeling, Matt, is that people think we're now out of the woods, that it's all sorted, that there won't be any more increase in COVID, and we're seeing across Europe that that's not so. And I think we need to be very careful to make sure that we're letting people know that they need to keep vigilant. They need to keep doing the things they've been doing to keep themselves, their families and their friends and their colleagues safe. So Matt, do you just want to walk us through where we are?
Absolutely. So I shall walk you through where we are now, and then I'll take you through the paper which sets out what our modelling work suggests may be happening next. So if you bear with me a second, I can just share my screen, which will show the current picture in terms of numbers of cases. So this is data that we present to various forums, and that's updated on the City Council website on a weekly basis based on the published data. So this chart shows the rolling 7-day average of daily new COVID-19 cases in Portsmouth. And we've had 95 new cases in the last 7 days, and this week we ticked over into just over 14,000 total positive COVID-19 test results, or individuals have had at least one positive result since the start of the pandemic. And you can see that since the middle of January, the national lockdown has seen our cases, as they have nationally, falling over the last couple of months. And a very similar picture in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So each of these, we call the spark line, shows the 4 Hampshire and Isle of Wight authorities. But what you'll see if you look at Southampton's line, which is the top left one, is that in the last week or so they've seen their cases rise. We saw a rise from the early part of last week to the early part of this week, although it's now come down a little bit. So we're definitely seeing a changing picture locally in terms of those numbers of new cases. And what we use as a standard comparator across the country is the 7-day rates per 100,000. So that way you can compare areas of different sized populations, but get an idea similarly of how they're affected. Portsmouth's 7-day rate per 100,000, let's say, has actually come down a little bit from where it was last week. So it's now at 44 per 100,000, down nearly 25% on a week ago. But earlier in the week we had, as I say, gone up slightly. What you can see from the map is that there are a number of parts of the country with enduring transmission and high rates continuing, shown in the darker red colours. But what you can also see from the table on the right hand side is that a number of other authorities in the southeast have seen their cases rise over the last week. And if you look at the southeast figure and the England figure, whilst they're down on last week, they're down very, very slightly. So we're definitely seeing a slowing down of the reduction in cases nationally and in increases in many places. And this next map shows the same thing, really. So if you look on the left-hand map, which is the UK, that's the case rates per local authority. So that's the same as the previous map, just with a different colour scheme. The right-hand map shows the percentage change from the previous week. So anything in turquoise colours shows that rates are still going down, and anything in the brown colours shows rates going up. And you can see that across the country, there's a really mixed picture, with a number of authorities seeing increasing rates this week compared to last week. I won't dwell on this slide because it's quite busy, but all of our cases at the moment are UK variant. So the chart on the top left shows the percentage of our cases, of the ones that were sent away for testing, that were new UK variant, and it was 100% last week, and it's been in the high 90% most weeks. So that's there for information. And the weekly rates by 15-year age bands, again, show that whilst rates have been coming down since their peak in all ages, we're still seeing highest rates amongst the working age adult population, kind of reiterating the need for everyone to maintain those behaviours, which is the lilac coloured line there. But they have been coming down in most ages, but that decrease is now levelling off. So that's where we are in terms of the current data. As I say, that's all available on the council website. What I want to do is just talk you through the report quickly, which sets out our modelling work around the potential for future COVID-19 cases. And sections 3.1 and 3.2, we just highlight that this is what's shown in the government's own modelling. So the modelling that informed the roadmap for easing restrictions, work taken on behalf of SAGE, shows that a rise in new positive COVID-19 cases is absolutely expected, but that mitigated by the rollout of the national vaccination programme, they assume that the pressure it creates in the health system will not be unsustainable. The Chief Medical Officer has reiterated why this also means we can't move more quickly than the roadmap sets out with its 5-week stages, so we can understand the impact at each point. Now, we've been doing modelling work across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight in partnership with other public health intelligence teams and on behalf of the local resilience forum since this time last year, pretty much. And our latest modelling the leader was referring to builds in those 4 stages of the lockdown release programme. It also builds in the rollout of the vaccine programme to try and understand how those 2 factors, one of which will lead to an increase in cases and one of which will mitigate that, play out in the local system. And what our model shows that a surge in cases is likely, that it will happen from when schools reopened last week, and that it will lead to some rise in hospitalisations that will peak in early summer, potentially around the level seen during the lockdown in November last year. That's if the national policy goes out in the way intended, and if the vaccine rollout programme is delivered again in line with the expectations set out in the national policy. If behaviour sees more contact than is envisaged under the social distancing rules, if people behave slightly differently and interpret the rules differently themselves, or indeed if the effectiveness of the vaccine rollout is reduced, then the modelling looks at the infection rates for the Portsmouth Hospitals University Trust catchment. That's the way that the model works, and suggests that our rates may peak in May, and that the pressure on the health system will be somewhere between the peak seen in April last year and November last year. And in all of those scenarios, the vaccine rollout programme then does see infections and hospitalisations fall away over the rest of the summer. I think what I want to reiterate, and I've highlighted in section 3.8 of the report, is that the scale and the timing of these further waves are driven on very, very uncertain modelling assumptions. We're working with the best assumptions we can gather from the nationally published evidence, but our understanding of that evolves all the time as vaccine programs change, as national policy changes, as new evidence emerges around things like infection and fatality rates from new variants and so on. So there's an awful lot of uncertainty in the model, and we absolutely wouldn't say we predict this number of infections by this date. It's more about understanding the kind of likely scale of those patterns, and to highlight that, as the leader rightly says, we're very much not out of the woods yet. There will be a further increase in infections, I'm sure, hopefully with good behaviour and with a sensible releasing of restrictions and a successful rollout of vaccines. That will be a manageable increase in infections and hospitalisations. And the local outbreak management plan, which sets out the Council and Partners response, has been refreshed and submitted and will be going to the local outbreak engagement board for approval on Monday, in line with the agreed governance for this work. And I will stop there. I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay, Councillor Matthew Winnington.
Thank you, Matt. Just before I make my comments, Matt, could you just to give a bit more idea of compliance, because I know some people have had some concerns over the last few weeks and months that some of the compliance has been effectively responsible for some of the issues that we've had prior to in early January and since then. Can you just give us an idea of what compliance has been like in the city over that period and nationwide as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly national evidence and the local evidence that we have from monitoring things like Google mobility data suggests that compliance has remained remarkably consistent throughout this current lockdown, and indeed has remained high in terms of people's compliance with the rules as they understand them. And I think that's where the challenge in all of this lies. But people say that they're sticking to the rules and say that they're following the guidance, and it's been remarkably consistent and high throughout the last year. I think the challenge is that if you look at the figures on the proportion of people, for example, that are now working in their normal place of work nationally, that's gone up above 50% of people now are back in their normal place of work, and the levels of activity that people are engaged in are significantly higher in this lockdown than in the first lockdown. So that does mean that more people, legitimately under the rules as they are, but are having a lot more contacts. So there is a lot more risk of infection spread. So against all that, the proportion of the population still susceptible is lower, and the vaccine program is reducing that all the time. So it's a bit of a balancing act between the two factors, I guess.
Okay, Matthew, to come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Matt. And I think that really is a testament to the people of the city, that they've worked extremely hard. And I think I've mentioned before about the real community spirit that this city has, as I think we all know when we live here. But I do think that is really meant that not just of people being looking out for each other by volunteering and going above and beyond to support their people in the community by actively doing something, but actually the compliance as well of people in sticking by the rules as they are at whatever time they are has been really good, and has really managed to keep our infection rate at the level it has been. So on my comments, then I think that is I thank Matt for the presentation. I think it is salient because it does show we're not out of the woods yet. But at the same time, we know within the government's programme that if that goes ahead as they've said, there are going to be more opportunities for people to do more things. But it is important that that people comply by those stages. So when you can do things, so the next one's 29th of March when that comes in, then it's the 21st of April, and it's just. We have got the light at the end of the tunnel, but it is a process. And I think that's by us keeping up that high level of compliance, but also understanding what you can do. And I would say to anyone who's watching today, do check out what it is you are going to be able to do with each phase of this, because I think that's really positive. And make plans for that, and do what you can do, and make sure, because as things are opening up more people are getting vaccinated, but also if you get offered a vaccination, please take the vaccination, and that's really important. That's going to help everyone in our community and well beyond, and that's going to enable that plan that's been set up by the government to be stuck to, and that will really give us an opportunity to have a much more open rest of 2021 compared to what we've had for the last year. So, but thank you, Matt, for the information. I think that's really the amount of work you and everyone else has done in terms of modelling and monitoring all this and steering us through the pandemic has been invaluable. And I look forward to the reports when we have the local outbreak engagement board next Monday.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, you're the only person to indicate to speak. Thank you very much. This was just an information item, but I thought it was really important that people in the city knew what's likely to be going on, because I think we don't want to lull people into a false sense of security and then people stop doing the really important stuff that keeps everybody safe, and not keeping distance from each other, not wearing face masks, not washing their hands often. So please, everybody, do keep safe, do keep well. And this is the last Cabinet meeting of this municipal year, so I'd like to record my thanks to all members of the Cabinet for their work, and also all the officers who've supported us so ably through the year. So thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the end of this meeting. Thanks and goodbye.
Okay, I'll close the live stream. You're still audible for a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Anna.